Marianne Martindale from the Alliance for a Better Utah, and welcome to this week's Better Utah Beat. The smell of warm candied almonds wafted through the north wing of the South Towne Exposition Center this weekend as families wandered from exhibit to exhibit. But these families weren't at the Dickens Festival or the Festival of Trees. They were at the Rocky Mountain Gun Show, and come they did, by the thousands. When I arrived at 9:30 Saturday morning, our communications director, Isaac Holyoke, was already holding a place for us in a line that wrapped from the north entrance of the Exposition Center all the way down the hall to where the home show was being concurrently held at the south end. Now, people at the gun show aren't bad people. There are hunters, antique collectors, simply the curious, as well as people who are generally concerned for their personal safety. And there were lots of people there with children. But there were also vendors selling what I can only refer to as a grenade launcher, long-range sniper rifles, and Nazi memorabilia. Not to mention the person-to-person firearm sales where background checks are not required by law. Now, to this gun owner, I own a 9mm Ruger, the scene made the historic Wild West look tame. But the show is a good reminder that the problem of gun violence in this country is connected to a culture that valorizes weapons. Gun violence doesn't only rear its ugly head when something terrible happens, like the mass shootings at an elementary school in Newtown, Connecticut, or a crowded movie theater in Aurora, Colorado. Gun violence occurs every single day in the United States. But there are some policies that are being put forth that could help reduce gun violence in America. And while no policy is perfect and the data is unclear on many issues, it seems worthwhile considering viewpoints from a variety of people and a variety of places. There are 3 specific policies that I've come across recently that I believe are worth debating. The first policy proposal calls for the reinstatement of the 1,000-foot ban on guns near schools. This policy addresses some of the immediate concerns of Sandy Hook without arming teachers or requiring that armed officers be posted at every entrance of an elementary school. Considering Utah's politics, this seems like a reasonable policy for reducing gun violence. The problem with this policy, however, is that it targets only one element of gun violence. And despite the horrific tragedy of the mass shootings at Sandy Hook Elementary School, school shootings actually make up a very small proportion of total gun violence. This policy has been instituted in Utah before. In fact, it was repealed just a couple of years ago, and it stands a reasonable chance of making it through Utah's legislature. The second policy suggestion comes from a reader of the Deseret News, Saeed Habashi of Bountiful. He argues that requiring an insurance policy to own a gun would be a reasonable way of reducing gun violence by allowing the market, through private insurance companies, to regulate the access to guns. Habashi suggests that all gun owners should be required to buy a liability insurance policy to cover damages should a gun accident occur. Insurance companies would thoroughly check the background of the applicant in order to reduce the insurance company's own liability. Much like car insurance, premiums could be renewed annually and adjusted accordingly. The third policy suggestion comes from a reader of the Salt Lake Tribune, Dave Cassidy of Sandy. He takes the relationship between guns and automobiles a little more seriously by suggesting that gun owners be licensed in much the same way automobile operators are. It is worth noting that according to the Utah Department of Health, Utah is currently just one of 5 states where an individual is more likely to be killed in gun violence than in an automobile accident, a statistic that is expected to be shared nationally by no later than 2015. Cassidy rightly considers the problem of gun violence as a public safety issue, one that can be reasonably regulated by the state to ensure the safety of its citizens. Though none of these policies are perfect, and though each require serious consideration, debating, and altering, they each represent thought-provoking ways of handling the problem of gun violence in America and in Utah, and they each provide concrete policy suggestions that Utah's incoming state legislators could debate over the next few months. We can only hope that should gun legislation be proposed, that the Utah State Legislature will give it the debate that it deserves. Until next week, this is Marianne Martindale with the Alliance for a Better Utah with this week's edition of the Better Utah Beat. Have a great week, and remember, together, we can make a better Utah. For more information, visit betterutah.org.